Hello, everyone. I'm Albert Shafford, and I'll be the moderator for this week's podcast. Welcome to our inaugural podcast for ISO 9001 and IATF 16949 and beyond, or IIB, sponsored by SNCS. And you can visit us at www.sncs-it.com. Our presenter for this and our future ISO podcast is Cindy Soltis-Stroud. She has over 35 years in the automotive industry. She has 30 years of implementation and auditing for ISO 9001, QS 9000, and TS 16949 and IATF 16949. And she has been a third-party auditor for the last 23 years. 30 years ago, Cindy was preparing for her first ever third-party registrations audit for QS 9000. She was the management representative responsible for creating and implementation of her company's QMS, or Quality Management System. And just the night before her audit, the plant manager calls her into his office. And she says, "Cindy, congratulations. You've been promoted to quality manager. Our previous quality manager had just quit, and good luck." So Cindy, tell us what happened on that first day.
Well, first of all, mind blown. You know, when the plant manager told me about that, I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to get through this audit? And because I was just the management rep, you know, responsible for the system and not necessarily the other quality activities.
Yep.
And so my plan was to say nothing. Right? I was just gonna keep it on the down low, and I thought, you know, if I don't bring it up, nobody's gonna ask, and nobody will ever know the difference. So I was really wrong about that. So the next day, you know, we're at the audit, and I remember specifically, you know, we're in the quality lab, you know, right outside of my now new office. And one of the quality techs comes up and they go, "Hey, Cindy, you know, congratulations on the quality manager position." And I just looked at the auditor, and she looked at me, and you know, I just kind of shrugged my shoulders, and she smiled and never said a word. You know, number one, she probably already had a heads up because she had a corporate escort, you know, from my company, which was Lear at the time. So she had a corporate escort, which he probably already informed her. And then she probably runs into this stuff all the time. So all I got was a smile, and I did all this worrying and fretting for absolutely nothing. But there's a lot of people that go through stuff like that, right? When they're getting ready for their audits, significant changes occur right before the audit. So, you know, one of the things I bring to the table from my the organizations that I work with is, you know, experience when things go wrong. So.
Yeah. And that's how a lot of people thrive, right? Here's the deep end, swim.
That's right. Exactly. Yep. Sink or swim. Let's go.
Yeah. So, Cindy, what's your story? How did you get involved in quality?
Yeah. So, I started in manufacturing up in Pennsylvania, right? I was in an injection molding facility, and you know, started out as the production manager secretary, worked my way out into customer service, started the purchasing department, you know, so I was a driver, and the plant manager actually had moved to Virginia, was working for a company called Automotive Industries, and invited me down to interview for customer service position. So I did that. So I was customer service and purchasing for an automotive supplier to Ford Motor Company, right? So I was a tier one supplier. And QS 9000 was coming out at that time, and I was bored out of my brain. My people were so good, and they made me look really good, and there was really no challenge left for me in my position. And I went, "Hey, what about this QS 9000 stuff?" And there was a position in Midland, Texas, but with the same company. So I transferred to Midland and became the management representative, and got the quality systems right in, and you know the rest, like how I got to be the quality manager. So that's how I got into quality. Well, and then just a little bit more on the story. I moved to San Antonio and took a quality manager's position in San Antonio, Texas, and Underwriters Laboratories was our registrar. And the auditor said to me, "Hey, Cindy, you'd be really good at this. Would you ever consider doing auditing?" I looked him right in the eye and I went, "Who wants to be you?" and I thought about it for a little bit, and I went, "You know what?" I said, let's give this gig a try, and let's see what happens. So, here I am 23 years later and loving it.
Nice.
So,
nice.
Yeah.
So this first podcast, you're calling it Where Do I Start?
Yeah.
Right? Where did you get the idea to do a podcast, and what do you plan to accomplish with it? What's the purpose?
That's a really good question. So I hadn't really thought about a podcast, but as I'm going through the audits, and talking to people, they get ideas from me and I get ideas from them, and we just happen to be talking about requirements and interpretations and all that. And they said, "Cindy, why aren't you doing a podcast? Why aren't you bringing this to everybody?" And I went, "Well, that's probably a really good idea." So it was just because I had some of my clients that were pushing me and wondering why I wasn't doing it in the first place. So that was one of the reasons that the podcast started. And then we brought up where do I start, right? Because it's really hard. I mean, it's really difficult to go, where the heck do I start?
Yeah.
So once I came up with that title, I went, well, let's just start at the beginning, right? And so people could learn a little bit about me and what I do and what my background is, so that they can feel more comfortable and confident in receiving information from me on ISO 9001,
Sure.
IATF, and and other standards. So it's a little confusing probably for people, where do I start? Because they're looking at where do they start, but we're going to get there. We're going to get there. But right now it's about me and where do I start?
Well, that's a good beginning, right?
Yeah.
It's a good starting point.
Yeah.
So you're planning on having more of these podcasts?
Yes, definitely. We're going to have more podcasts. For sure, we'll be doing at least monthly. And this one will start in September, and we'll talk a little bit about, why September. But, we'd really like to do it twice a week. Or not twice a week, woo! About twice a month.
Okay.
That would be really good, yeah.
So what can the audience expect? Just like from the first one, the beginning, talking about you and your experience, all the way up to IATF 16949? Is that the plan?
Absolutely. That is the plan. So ISO 9001 and IATF have so much similarity. In fact, IATF is built off of ISO. So you really can't talk about ISO 9001 without talking about IATF, right? So we're really going to cover both in depth, right? ISO 9001 and IATF, but it's not just the standard, right? It's not just going, what's the standard or what's the interpretation. It's like, hey, what are best practices? What have I seen? What are the mistakes that people are making? Because those are the things that you really learn from. What are the misinterpretations of the standard that people are continually stumbling? And even though they think they know it, they're getting nonconformances because they just can't get it right until we issue a major nonconformance, and then everybody's mind is blown, when that happens. So, trying to help people just overall understand what are the best implementation strategies, and then interpretations and best practices and stumbling blocks so that we can avoid those.
Okay. That's a good segue, because my next question is, what are the differences and similarities between ISO 9001 and IATF 16949?
That's a really good question. And I really have thought about this, and I'm like, how can I create this visual for people about what the differences are between ISO 9001 and IATF? Because everybody hears the blah blah blah, right? Well, this compared to this, who cares, right? We get into that. So I think of it like this. If you're a Marvels fan, I'm a Marvels fan. I'm not a geek, but I'm a Marvels fan. And Captain Steve Rogers, right? Before, he was just, Steve Rogers, before, the meek, mild guy that wanted to, had a great heart and a great core and a great foundation. But he just wanted to be more. He wanted to do the best that he could do, right? So he goes through this transformation to Captain America. Well, ISO 9001 is Steve Rogers before, and IATF is Captain America, right? So it gives you a really good, visual of the difference. And then one of the other things, the difference between ISO 9001 and IATF is ISO 9001 is Gumby, right? And IATF is not. So when you look at ISO 9001 as Gumby, very flexible, super flexible. So if I'm ISO 9001, I fit the service industry. I fit aftermarket. I fit manufacturing. I can be a restaurant. I can be a one-man company working out of my kitchen. In fact, I audited a woman in her kitchen and certified her to ISO 9001 because all of her manufacturing of safety clothing was outsourced. So, that was interesting. So, one-man show. So, ISO 9001, you can be one person, to thousands of people, right? One company to global, but it fits any company, any industry. It doesn't matter, right? You can be ISO 9001.
So you can think of ISO 9001 as the foundation, the basis for the core for all these quality standards.
You're right, Albert. That's exactly what it is. ISO 9001 is the core of many of the standards that people are using right now. Aerospace and 14,001 and IATF, and it just goes on and on and on, right?
Okay.
So just one more thing. IATF is strictly automotive, right? And it's strictly production parts going to the OEMs. You can't be aftermarket. You can't outsource your manufacturing. So there's very strict things for IATF. So where ISO 9001 is Gumby, IATF is an oak. It's just boom, here you are, and that's it. And that's what you work with, right?
All right.
So, yeah.
That's a good analogy, I think.
I hope so.
And for the last 23 years, you've been a third-party auditor, right?
Yep.
Can you tell us what that means and maybe give us a comparison about second party, first party, and how they relate to each other or differences?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, perfect.
I sure can. Yeah, so and some people get this confused, and I think that's one of the reasons that we're talking about this is because I've had not a lot of people, but a couple people go, what does that mean, right? So first party auditor would be anybody within your organization auditing your organization, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it's from another plant or another location, you're still doing an internal, right? Internal to my company, that's a first party audit, right? Mm-hmm. So if we're going to do a second party audit, when your customers come to your manufacturing site or they come to your location and they do an audit, that is a second party audit being performed by your customers on their behalf, right? They're doing it for themselves. When you do it, so you can go to your suppliers or you can go to other organizations that are doing work for you and you audit them, that is a second party audit. You're performing a second party audit. So a third party audit is totally independent of both of those, right? So the third party audit basically equals total independence from your company or from your suppliers. We're totally non-related. So when auditors come into your facility or to your location, well, for any standard, right, we can't have a conflict of interest, and that's one of the things that we have to identify right up front, that there's no conflict, because we want to make sure that this third party audit that's being performed is pure, right? And that we truly are we're not uninterested, but we're separate from any of the activities that are occurring in your organization.
Okay. And so I guess in addition to that, how did you get involved in system software for business management?
That is a story. That is another thing on my plate. So yes, we started the company in 2015, and we launched our software in 2017. But how we got started was totally unexpected and unplanned. I was on a trip from Los Angeles on a direct flight to San Antonio, and I was sitting in first class, and I was probably in seat 3 or 4, I don't know. And I'm sitting by this woman, and her husband's in the first row, and so they asked if they could switch, right? So the wife went up to sit with her husband, and Robert, who was sitting up in the front, came back to sit by me. We totally blew each other off and ignored each other for probably, the first hour of the flight. And maybe about the last 30 minutes of the flight, we started to talk. And he asked me one key question. And he said, if there was anything that you could do to change your industry, what would it be? And I went, oh my gosh, let me tell you what, and so we talked about all the trials and tribulations that people trying to implement these management systems, business management systems, go through, and all the things that I had in mind that I would love to do to make it easier for people with an integrated system. And Robert had, 30 plus years of software background. And he said at the end of the flight, we'd exchange information, and he said to me, he goes, you and I are going to be business partners. And I looked at him and I go, you're nuts. But I don't know, you're smoking. I think you're a little wacko. I got off the plane. I didn't tell him that to his face, but it was, and he calls me, and he called me a couple times, and I'm like, I don't know. And he calls me again. And so finally I go, okay, let's meet for lunch and talk about it, because I want to make sure he understood exactly where I was coming from.
Yeah.
So I looked at my husband, and I remember we were sitting in the kitchen, and I go, hey, hon, I go, I met a guy on a plane, and we're going to go have lunch. And he looked at me, and he goes, are you okay? I said, yeah. I said, I'm fine. He goes, do you need me to go? And I go, no, because I'm okay. I said, if I'm not back in a couple hours, I said, come looking for me.
Should I pack my bags and go?
Yeah. So Robert and I met once, and we ended up meeting about 4 or 5 times, and then finally it clicked, and he went, I understand exactly what you're talking about. And so we were on the same page, and I went, all right, I'm in, let's do it. Right. So that's how I get started. Yeah.
That's how SNIC got started. That's great. And why the name SNICS?
Oh, that's a really good question, and one everybody should ask. It's really hard to name a product. when you're trying to think, and without a huge marketing team, right? And you're trying to start your business and trying to think of your product name, and it was really important that the software reflect business sustainability, transfer of knowledge, because these are all fail points, right, for any organization, and just information, transfer of information, right? And so Google has a great thing where you can type in all these words, right, and go, I want I want something to reflect all these things, and it will throw names out at you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So going through all the names that Google pushed out for me, and one of them was, Snicks, and I was like, hey, that's kind of cool, little catchy. And I Googled Snicks, and it comes out that it's slang for it's the bomb. So I went, yeah. I said that's what we're gonna go with. It's the bomb.
Okay.
So yeah.
So SNCS does provide a good format and quality, and guarantees continuity, right, throughout the process. So I guess it matches the name.
Well, it does, and that's what we wanted, right? And so it's really cool because it pulls all that foundation. In fact, we have our very first module that we put out is called SNCS Core, simply because it is the core foundation of any business management system. And so, it includes the process flow, risk analysis, opportunity analysis, metrics, management review, records identification, requirements for your customers. We automatically map out the processes, which people it blows their mind, right? And some people do it really well, and other people just make it so complicated. So we just made it very basic and simple, and we literally replace your quality manual. You can put your policies in there. And that's just the core.
Yeah.
And we've got a good reporting format on the dashboard, and that was the intent for the core, was just to give a really good foundational system for people just to start building off of.
Okay.
And so we were really excited about that.
It's good. It matches the name and the purpose. That's great.
Woohoo for us.
Yeah. So let me go back to another question more about you. How do you manage, running this company and still doing audit full time?
That's
you do both.
That's a really good question. You know what? It's good people. It's a good team. It's a good system. It's a good, right? I mean, I've been very blessed. Like in my previous work that allowed me to move into QS 9000. I can't do it without a good team, and so we have a really great team that supports SNCS. And the software is, we get input from our users for improvements, and we react to that, and we just make it stronger and stronger and stronger.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's basically what I'm tasked with, is making the system stronger and not reacting to issues, because it's a very stable, and it sustains itself.
Okay,
which
great.
is wonderful. Yeah, and it's cloud-based, right?
Mm-hmm.
So everything's run off the cloud, so we don't have to worry about people in organizations and their systems. They just work directly off the cloud, and then my team supports that. So it's amazing.
So I guess we can talk more about SNCS in a future podcast. We'll kind of dive in, but
yeah,
I think that would be a good podcast as well. So
agreed.
I have another question for you.
Yes.
Can you audit a company as a third-party auditor if you're using SNCS? You personally?
Me personally using SNCS? No. So I was being smart. So no, I can't, because that would be a conflict of interest. So anytime an organization is utilizing a consultant or using the software that would be yours, that would be a conflict of interest. And so if it was a company that I'm already auditing and they started using SNCS, then I would have to say, you know what, somebody else is going to have to pick up the audit. Next time I'd have to back out.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same thing if I had any current customers, right, I was, tasked with auditing that would be coming up, I would have to say, oh, no, can't do that. Conflict of interest, right? So.
Okay. And being that you've been doing this for 23 years, right, visiting multiple companies year after year, should there be any concern about confidentiality in these podcasts?
No, absolutely not. So, no. So I'm bound by a confidentiality agreement with the company that I work for right now, right? Doing the third party audits. And in addition, I can't remember anything 5 minutes after I leave a company. There's so much information and so much. I have this filter and it just leaks. But there's things that stay with you, and there's um, situations that I can talk about, right? There's examples that I can talk about. I'm not going to talk about the company, and I'm not going to talk about um, any people, specific people or places or intellectual property. Absolutely not. It's just strictly about the standard and how everybody can implement it better with examples that I've gained from my experience, and what I say absolutely represents no one but me, right? It's just my knowledge, not my company, not the company that I work for or anybody else. It's just me, right?
More experience and, sharing what you know.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
Tips and tricks of the trade, I guess.
Exactly, and there's so many. And I run across stuff all the time, and I go, oh my God, I got to talk about that. Because, it's mind-blowing sometimes what you run into.
Okay. And is having these podcasts considered consulting according to the rules of IATF 16949?
That is a really good question, and the answer is no. So, the rules say that you can't consult, right? So, and a third party organization cannot consult, and that's one of the things that we're evaluated on whenever we get witnessed to make sure that we're not consulting. But the allowance is, hey, if you do it to the public, and it's a public announcement and public questions, and it's not targeted at a specific company or organization, then it's not considered consulting. Okay. And I'm not doing training specifically either, because no one's paying me to do this, no one's hiring me to do this. It's just information. Right?
All right, perfect.
Yeah.
And with all your third-party experience, if you were to go back and be a quality manager again, what would you do differently? Because I'm sure a lot of quality managers want to know.
Yeah, everything. I would do everything different. When I went into quality management, or as a quality manager, and we all have to be a little cocky, right? We all have to have a little bit of attitude, because you run up to so many things and so many people that are continually challenging you and wanting you to bypass certain systems, and you have to stand your ground. So you have to have a little bit of attitude, and you have to get a little bit cocky and stand your ground. But I would do nothing. Well, I did, I did a couple things right. There were a few things that I did that I still share with people when I audit them that really worked well for me in certain circumstances, and I share that information. But yeah, overall, knowing what I know now, and I've said many times, I wish I could have been a third-party auditor first before I was a quality manager. So yeah, a lot. I would say 95%. I would do differently.
Okay. So, Cindy, I guess the purpose of this initial podcast is just so people know a little bit more about you and your background. Can you just tell us, just some simple takeaways that people can consider immediately?
Yeah, there's a lot, and I was even, thinking about that this morning. So here I would say this, and this is what I run into a lot in organizations. Regardless of what standard that you're certified to, know it. You should know that standard, right? You're implementing the systems. You need to know the standard. Do you need to be able to quote it by clause? Absolutely not. I don't do that. I don't want to do that. I have no interest in doing that, and I would never expect anybody else to do that either. However, you should have some idea of what the requirements are and some idea of where to find them in the standard. Your auditors are not always correct, right? And you need to know, because you need to challenge them in a professional way, to say, listen, here's the requirement. This is how we interpret this. How are you getting to the interpretation that you're at, right? And many people will look you right in the eye and they'll go, well, where's that in the standard? Well, you should know that. You shouldn't be asking me, as a third-party auditor. We're only coming in and verifying or validated that the system that you have put in place and the knowledge that you have meets the requirements. And so as soon as you start saying, well, where's the standard, or show me this, or well, wait a minute, you show me. It's your system. I'm happy to have a conversation with you, but you've got to know something, right? So you don't have to be like the super expert, but you should be knowledgeable and understand how it fits into your system.
Okay. And we're getting close to the end. So for the next podcast, what can our audience expect?
Well, you know what? Before I get to that, I think one of the things that I want to say, just back up a little bit, this September is our 5th year anniversary for release of our first sale to a major automotive supplier. They're a global supplier, and they purchased our software 5 years ago in September, and it was our very first sale. So I'm super excited about that, and I think putting the podcast out on our anniversary of our first sale is really kind of cool. I wanted to bring that up before we forgot, because we've been around for 5 years, and we keep growing and learning a lot, and we have SNCS Core, and then we have the layered process audits and stuff that we do too, and that our users are super excited about. So
okay, so the software has been around for 5 years.
The software has been released and available for 5 years. The company's been around since 7. Yeah, but the software has been around for 5, and it's just it's coming to it's been in reality, and we continue to grow and develop, and it's just super exciting. It's cool, so cool to take the knowledge that I have and the frustrations that people and organizations have, and put it into a system. And there isn't any system out there that's like us, because I'm kind of like off the wall a little bit, but it's working. And the cool thing is the process owners. So it's not just the quality manager, really people in quality. The process owners love it, right? And so I think that's the trick for anything, is to get a system in place that not just makes the quality manager and management happy, but the process owners and the people that have to use it are super excited about it. So
a lot of positive feedback.
A lot of positive feedback. Yeah, so we're doing really well. Okay, now back to your question. Sorry about that. So you asked about the next podcast, right?
Yes. What can we expect?
Yeah. So where do we start, right? We start with the core of our business, and we start with building a good foundation, because that foundation means everything, and it drives everything that you do going forward. So our next podcast is going to be about building a core, and what does that mean? What are the core parts of our business management systems? And I call it a business management system. It's synonymous with quality management systems, but it's not about quality. It's about the business and the quality of the business, right?
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about core. What are the core items coming out of ISO 9001 and IATF, because they're exactly the same, with a few exceptions. What those are, and what to do, how to get them started, and what they should look like.
All right. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for your time. This concludes our initial podcast for ISO 9001 to IATF 16949 and beyond.
Awesome.
And I hope you guys join us next time.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and don't forget to visit us at www.snicks-it.com. Thank you. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoy this video, the first in a series of informational videos for the ISO 9001 and IATF 16949 community. On our next video, we will provide information on how to navigate the different ISO 9001 and IATF 16949 requirements all companies face during their audit process. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you would like a demo of the SNCC software, contact information is provided below this video. Thanks again, and have a great day.